Plummer. I represent the 55th State Senate District. I appreciate everybody being here today. Today we're here to talk about a tragedy. Like many people around the United States, we're here to mourn the loss of 18-year-old Sheridan Gorman, who was murdered in Chicago this week. We'd like to send our sincere condolences to Miss Gorman's family. I can't imagine what they're going through right now in such a senseless murder. This murder, while tragic, is just one example of numerous tragedies we've seen in the state of Illinois. We continue to see dangers being foisted upon the citizens of Illinois because of the policies of Governor Pritzker, Mayor Brandon Johnson, and their Democrat majorities here in Springfield. This young college student was allegedly shot and killed by an illegal immigrant who was known to law enforcement and should not have been out on the streets to commit this crime. What we know is this person was caught at the border in 2023 and released by the Biden administration to cause crime and havoc in our communities. He arrived in Chicago, and within 30 days of being in Chicago, he was arrested for committing another crime and immediately released back onto the streets. He did not show up to his court dates, so for over 2 years, there's been an active warrant for this illegal immigrant who's been running around Chicago committing crimes and now has committed the worst of the worst crimes, a murder of an innocent 18-year-old who was enjoying her time in college and building for her future. Where's the outrage? You know, it took Governor Pritzker about 1 minute to run up to Minnesota when the national media was in Minnesota talking about the victims of Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz and his constituents who died after attacking ICE. Governor Pritzker was the first one on a plane to Minnesota. Governor Pritzker is the first one to go to other communities to talk about the tragedies that supposedly take place there when he wants to point his finger at our law enforcement community. But where's the outrage in Illinois? Once again, another person senselessly murdered on the streets of Illinois. Governor Pritzker goes to California, he goes to Washington, D.C. He has time for his presidential campaign, but where is the time for the people in Illinois who are suffering? I fully understand, after serving in the state Senate for as long as I have with Governor Pritzker, that he is pathologically incapable of taking responsibility for his failed policies. We see it in numerous areas. However, the most troubling spot is when we see it in criminal justice. And the fact that victims in Illinois always take a back seat. There's always an excuse for the perpetrators of the crime. There's always an excuse for the failed policies. But there's never action taken to protect our communities and protect our families. This is just one example of numerous examples we've seen. 5 Illinoisans have been murdered in the last year at the hands of illegal aliens who should not have been in Illinois and should not have been on the streets. Governor Pritzker and his allies need to recognize that allowing violent offenders to continue to roam our communities will continue to cause deaths of innocent Illinoisans, would continue to cause heartache for families throughout Illinois, and will continue to cause problems as our communities should be focusing on things like education and rebuilding and growing their economy and finding opportunity, just like Sheridan Gorman was doing in Illinois, planting her roots and building for the future. A future cut short by the failed policies of Governor Pritzker and his Democrat allies because they put criminals ahead of innocent Illinoisans, and this is just one more sad, tragic example of that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to State Senator Steve McClure.
Thank you, Senator Plummer. Steve McClure, and I represent the 54th District in the Illinois State Senate, and before I became a state senator, I was a prosecutor right here in Springfield. And I just want to say to Sheridan Gorman's family, I offer my deepest condolences, and certainly it's going to be a very, very difficult journey for that family from here on out. And certainly anything that we can do and any suggestions that they have, we are open because something needs to be done. And certainly Sheridan needs justice and her family needs justice. And I have to say that one of the most difficult things that I have found that has been trending in Illinois politics with some politicians is blaming victims. And you've got a Democrat politician in Chicagoland blaming the victim. And the thing is that we have to support our victims, and we have to protect our victims, and we have to do whatever we can to ensure that we don't have any more victims in our state. So instead of brushing these things off and blaming everybody else, I think it's time for the governor to actually roll up his sleeves and start attempting to protect the citizens of our state. Sheridan was a person. She was not a political pawn or a statistic. She had her whole life ahead of her. And because of the complete and total failure of our government, she will never get to live it. For years, Senate Republicans have warned that the sanctuary policies Governor Pritzker and his allies have pushed and touted here in Illinois have and will continue to cost innocent Illinoisans their safety and in some cases even their lives. Governor Pritzker is failing miserably in that responsibility. Not just in Chicago, but even places downstate. We've seen people killed in DUIs. We've seen people that are not able to be charged or even held in jail because of things that Governor Pritzker has enacted over the course of his time in office. I mean, we had a man who's an illegal immigrant here where in his backyard there was a dead woman found. He was charged with crimes, felony crimes, and yet not able to be detained under Illinois law. What kind of nonsense is this? And I saw Governor Pritzker said something about correcting immigration policies, blaming President Trump. Let me make this clear. This guy who murdered this innocent woman in Chicago was arrested for retail theft. At the time that he was arrested, he was already illegally here. And since being arrested, there are media reports that he has TB. What immigration policy in our state or country is going to allow for someone who has TB, who's committing crimes, to remain here? And the answer is no sensible policy would. But Governor Pritzker would. Why is he bending over backwards for people that are coming into our country illegally and in some cases murdering our constituents across this state? It's unbelievable. And no matter what the criminal policies are in the state, no matter what happens, it's always someone else's fault. Well, guess what, Governor? It's your fault if you don't fix this right away. I think the people of Illinois demand it, and I think if you care at all about these victims and any future victims from any of these crimes that have taken place in the last few years, you'd want to do something about it. And you'd want to stand up for them for once, instead of standing up to criminals and people that are in this country illegally who are committing crimes and out without justification for 2 years dodging the police. And these people are allowed to be released because of the Safety Act and because of your policies, Governor Pritzker, that are protecting them to ensure they can stay in this country to kill people in our state. I think the people of this state have had enough, and I hope, Governor Pritzker, that you've had enough and that you'll work with us to stop this from happening again. And with that, I turn over to Senator Terry Bryant.
Hi, and thank you all for coming today. I'm Senator Terry Bryant. I represent the 58th Senate District, and I also want to extend condolences to the family of Sheridan Gorman today. Obviously, it's very tragic. I have a granddaughter right now who's a freshman at SIUC who's living with us while she attends school. I cannot imagine what the family is going through right now to get the kind of phone call that family got just in the morning after this happened. So there's a lot of frustration surrounding preventable death like this, and it's a heavy cross to bear for any family. So in the theme of what we're talking about today is the need to change our laws here in Illinois. And in this case, it was basically to hear that an 18-year-old is still a child, and to hear that this senseless death has happened. And, you know, I'm going to echo what my two colleagues here have said, because I also have been in communication with Joe Abraham, whose daughter, Katie, was killed in January of 2025 in a DUI accident where the guy was here illegally, slammed into the back of her car going 80 miles an hour, and he still has not gotten justice for his daughter. And in his case, we now are hearing that that individual may have tested positive for HIV. So years ago, you would have had someone coming through Ellis Island who was checked for whatever their health status was, and if it was determined, even if they came here illegally, that their health status didn't meet requirements to be here, then they were forced out of our country at that point. And so at this point, I'm just asking that we take another look. As it stands today, the Trust Act bans local and state law enforcement, including the Department of Corrections, from working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. I've been talking about this now for several years because under the Trust Act and actually the Move Forward Act, the Way Forward Act expanded on the Trust Act, which under the Trust Act, at least law enforcement could cooperate with other law enforcement, but under the Way Forward Act, they can't even cooperate at all. And although I know now that the individual who has been arrested in Sheridan's case actually has had a ICE detainer put on that person, but we know very clearly that ICE detainers don't really mean anything in the state of Illinois, that law enforcement cannot cooperate with ICE detainers. And so I'm asking that my colleagues join me in an effort to repeal the Trust Act. So my bill, Senate Bill 1316, restores the ability of local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE and ensure that individuals charged with serious crimes do not slip through the cracks. It's time for the governor to prioritize the safety of Illinois residents over misguided sanctuary policies. So Governor Pritzker's responsibility to protect the citizens of Illinois is not a radical political ideology. And even though, we're here today to talk about this terrible, terrible act, someone is going to try to say that this is politicizing what's going on. It's not politicizing what is going on. The fact is that we have instance after instance after instance where innocent individuals who are living here in Illinois, whether they're a citizen of Illinois or someone like Sheridan who's here from another state, are here to just go about their life in Illinois, and it's being radically disrupted by individuals who not only should not be in Illinois, but shouldn't be in the country at all and who are here illegally. So I'm urging my colleagues to join me in the legislation, again, it's Senate Bill 1316, to repeal the Trust Act. So in closing, I would say this. My prayers are with the loved ones of Sheridan Gorman as they're forced to grieve over her loss and grapple with the preventable circumstances that led to her murder. My colleagues and I will continue to call for action and justice, but I would like to close with some of the words of those who knew her, loved her, and will be keeping her memory alive. And this is a quote from her family. "We are gravely disappointed by the policies and failures that allowed this individual to remain in a position to commit this crime. When systems fail, whether through release decisions, lack of coordination, or unwillingness to act, the consequences are not abstract, they're real. And in our case, they're permanent." And that comes from the Gorman family statement. But I want to read, I jotted down something before I came in here, and this is from Joe Abraham regarding his daughter, Katie. And this goes back several months ago. And Joe said he believed what happened to his daughter was not an isolated tragedy. It was a warning. And we failed to heed that warning and so many others. And now we have another 18-year-old who has been tragically killed. And it just cannot go it cannot go on. So thank you, and I guess we'll take some questions.
Hey, everybody. And I know, Senator McClure, you kind of touched on a little bit of what the governor had said earlier, but wanted to get your reaction to this, and for any of you, and also have a question. The governor also said today, and in my view, we have a lot of work that we need to continue to do. But it is the job of the federal government to go after immigration enforcement, and it is the job of our local and state law enforcement to prosecute or catch violent criminals and prosecute them. And we should continue to do that both on the state level and the national level. So So what's your reaction to those comments, also considering that, the Trump administration has tried to sue over the Trust Act and the Way Forward Act and the Chicago Welcoming City Ordinance, and so far, the courts have ruled in Pritzker and Brandon Johnson's favor, so how do you get around all that as well?
Well, first of all, Governor Pritzker's policies when it comes to actually prosecuting violent criminals have been abhorrent. He has presided over some of the worst crime rates we have ever seen in the history of our state. He has not batted an eye. No matter what horrible crime happens, he just doesn't seem to have any compassion or empathy for victims. And I would say that even the original Safety Act, they changed it a couple of years later before it took effect, but the amount of people, including violent criminals, it was going to release was insane. And so it's laughable that he pretends to care about that, because he doesn't. I would also say that Governor Pritzker has gone out of his way to impede federal authorities. He gave a speech saying, I think, if you come for his people, you're coming for him. You got to go through him. Excuse me. He said, if you come for my people, you got to go through me. Well, this man who just murdered this innocent college student, that's one of Pritzker's people. That's who he's trying to protect. You know who we're trying to protect? That poor college girl who got murdered in a public place in Chicago. And that's the difference right now. And I have to say also, there's a bill that I think Governor Pritzker signed it recently where it allows for, if somebody commits a violent crime like battery, for that to be hidden from public view. Governor Pritzker, why are you trying to hide violent crimes from the public, and why are you allowing potential murderers who have things like TB to stay in our country illegally? That's not a problem for President Trump, Governor Pritzker. That's a problem from you, because you're not cooperating with the feds. And in fact, you're claiming that you're going to put your body before anybody else can be touched in this state. He's very willing to attack Republicans. I think he compared us to Nazis. He goes to other states and says it's Republicans that should be never have a moment of peace. You know who deserves to have a moment of peace? The family and this young woman who were murdered. They deserve to have peace, and Governor Pritzker doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, to that point, I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm from Southern Illinois, and we have a little saying that I think everyone's heard: actions speak louder than words. Governor Pritzker's the first one to show up after tragedy and have some nice quotes for the media. But you want action? Do something about it. Fix it. It's your policies. How many Senate bills have Republicans drafted that are sitting in assignments, sitting in purgatory, never to see the light of the day, that would have prevented stuff like this? How many of these press conferences have I stood up here, Jeremy, while you sat in the audience, and we talked about people who died, who should not have died, people who were murdered because of failures of Governor Pritzker? We can talk about the Prisoner Review Board. We can talk about this. We can talk about an endless trail of madness and mayhem that's affecting our communities because this governor prioritizes left-wing, soft-on-crime policies instead of prioritizing the safety for our families and our communities. So, nice quotes, Governor. Guess what? Sheridan Gorman is not waking up tomorrow. And guess what? There's more victims coming. And it's because of this governor. So I don't care what he says in the newspaper. I want to see action from the governor. I want to see policies and legislation advanced through this chamber that will actually put an end to this madness. You don't see this happening in Indiana. You don't see this happening in Missouri. You don't see this happening in many other places, but you see it here in Illinois. And this governor is doing nothing about it.
I want to add to this, Jeremy, I don't think it was actually to your question, but the governor has quotes that everybody picks up. I don't see any quote anywhere that says that he has met with the family of Sheridan Gorman. Am I?
Yeah, I was just going to say, today I did ask him about that. And I know he said that, he's reached out to local officials to get the word out of condolences for him and his wife, but he said that he's hesitant. He basically said there was a little hesitance to do that right now because he's a stranger. He wants to wait for them to grieve and for the.
Well, I don't believe he's talked to Joe Abraham. So, at what point, thank you for your answer. Yeah. At what point has there been enough time that, now I know the family has asked to kind of be left alone. I get that part. But I'm pretty sure that a family would take a call from a governor who wants to issue condolences to them personally. You don't go through somebody else to offer your condolences when you are the governor of the state where this happened. And so I would just say to him, you've got to start talking to people about what is going on. I have for months now been turning in a request at least 3 times a week to meet with Governor Pritzker as a sitting senator in this state to talk about what's going on in the Department of Corrections. He's non-responsive to all of these tragedies that are going on, whether it's on the street or whether it's in one of his own agencies. You cannot get to him in order to just tell him what is going on. Whatever this bubble is that they have around him needs to end. He's the governor of this state. He can run for president later. But right now, he needs to be the leader of this state and lead by changing these horrible laws that have been put into place, mostly because he shoved them through, and it's because of his policies.
All right, thank you guys. We gotta get these folks.
No, wait a second, wait, there's been one question, there's been exactly one question. This is-
Okay.
Hey, let's go. Hey, we're good.
Senator McClure, you said something about blaming victims?
Yeah.
Okay, can you refresh me on that?
Yeah, there was a couple of instances. Number one, there was an alderman, I think, in Chicagoland who claims that perhaps the gunman in this case was startled. That's on social media. That's kind of been blowing up. Someone else talked about her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was present for a speech unrelated to this case with President Tony Preckwinkle in Cook County, and she made the statement that there's a lot of people getting shot in Chicago, but the victims are just as likely to be the shooters. So that was kind of okay, is kind of how she dealt with it. That's unacceptable to me. I think people all across this state, no matter where they live, no matter what neighborhood, should have safety. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of people like the people I just mentioned, Tony Preckwinkle and this alder person, that want to blame victims, and they don't want to do anything to try to stop the crime and help the victims.
And one more, or one and a half more. How's it gonna be different when Bailey's governor? And keep in mind, he is probably gonna have a Democratic legislature to work with.
Well, I mean, here's what I would say. I think if the governor were to make a push and actually try to get people to come on board, I believe that there could be reasonable changes that in a bipartisan way we can get passed. But as long as the governor is obsessed with running for president and going out to tout the most liberal policy so he can try to win a Democratic primary, I don't think anything's going to change. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Dave, to this point, I don't think we even have to get into, certain personalities. I think Governor Bailey is going to be a lot better than Governor Pritzker on crime. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But I'm talking to the people of Illinois. Republicans, Democrats, independents, whatever else they might classify them as. Does anyone think it makes sense that this guy who has already committed multiple crimes gets arrested in Chicago and immediately released? Does that make sense? Does it make sense to anyone in Illinois, regardless of their political affiliation, that this guy is out committing crimes, running around the city for more than 2 years with an active warrant? Does it make any sense to anybody that this guy shoots and kills this innocent person, is in custody, and the federal government makes a detainer request and the governor denies it or suggests that they're going to deny it? Does it make any sense, shifting gears, does it make sense to anybody in this state, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that the governor of Illinois would put a convicted double murderer on the prisoner review board to vote to let people out of prison? Does it make any sense to anyone in this state that this governor would push the policies that he's pushing that everyone acknowledges increases crime? Does it make any sense? It makes sense to very few Republicans, no Democrats, no independents, except for the guy in the governor's mansion. He is not putting the safety of our communities first. He's not putting the families of this state first. And, like Senator Bryant said, I'm heartbroken over Sheridan Gorman. I hate talking about it because I don't want it to be politicized, but it is another one. It's another tragedy. How many more do we need? People in Illinois demand change, and the governor better listen to them.
All right, thank you guys. We got to get them to the committee.
Thanks, everybody.